Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world of glowing furnaces and whispering sands, where time itself gets trapped in glass. Picture yourself in a smoky Venetian workshop, the air thick with heat and the tang of molten silica. You're standing by an artisan, his face lit by the orange pulse of a fire as he twirls a glowing blob of glass like it's a star plucked from the sky. This is where the hourglass begins, in the 8th century, when the need to measure time outpaces the sun's lazy arc or a candle's fickle burn. You're about to follow the journey of this delicate invention, born from human ingenuity and a bit of sandy magic. Fair warning, you might not survive the sheer patience it took to perfect this thing. Imagine waiting for sand to trickle just right. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Venice, or what will become the glittering queen of the Adriatic. It's the 8th century, and the city's a maze of canals and ambition, its glassmakers already legendary for bending fire to their will. You're standing in a cramped workshop, the walls blackened from years of furnace smoke. The artisan before you, let's call him Matteo, is no ordinary craftsman. He's part alchemist, part poet, coaxing molten glass into shapes that defy its liquid chaos. His hands move with a rhythm that feels almost holy, dipping a long iron blowpipe into the furnace's heart. The heat singes your eyebrows and you flinch. Bet you didn't expect to sweat this much in a bedtime story, huh? Matteo blows gently, and a small, perfect sphere forms, glowing like a tiny sun. He works fast, shaping another, then joins them with a narrow glass tube, the waste of what will become the hourglass. This isn't just art, it's a revolution. Before this, sailors guessed time by the stars, and monks prayed until their candles sputtered out. But Matteo's creation, it's about to change everything. The hourglass's origin is murky, and historians still argue whether it was a monk's brainstorm or a sailor's desperate fix. The mainstream fact is clear. By the 8th century, these glass timers started appearing in Europe, their sand trickling with eerie precision. A quirky tidbit? Some early glassmakers believed the sand had to come from a specific beach, blessed by a saint, to keep time pure. You smirk at the thought. Sacred sand? Sounds like something your weird uncle would sell on Etsy. But Matteo doesn't care about myths. He's focused, sealing the glass with a practiced flick. The hourglass isn't just a tool, it's a pact between man and time, a way to bottle the intangible. You watch him pour fine sand into the top bulb, and it flows like a whisper, each grain catching the firelight. The sand settles, and Matteo tilts the glass, testing it. 1 minute, 2, perfect. You're mesmerized, aren't you? The way the sand seems to dance, not just fall. This is no mere object. It's a tiny universe, counting down moments that matter. You step closer, the workshop's heat wrapping around you like a blanket. Matteo's not alone. Apprentices scurry about, hauling wood for the furnace, their faces smudged with soot. The air hums with purpose. Venice's glass industry is still young, but it's fierce, driven by trade and secrets passed down like heirlooms. Matteo's hourglass isn't a one-off. It's a response to a world begging for precision. Ships are crossing oceans, and churches are scheduling prayers with military rigor. You can almost hear the creak of a distant ship, its crew praying they don't overshoot their port because someone misread the stars. The hourglass will fix that, giving sailors a way to measure time at sea, no sun required. You glance at Matteo's hands, rough as old leather, and wonder how many tries it took to get this right. Did he burn himself? Curse the glass when it shattered? Probably. You'd bet he's got stories that make your modern microwave dinners seem pathetic. As you watch the sand trickle again, you feel time itself shift. It's not just grains falling, it's the pulse of an era waking up. The hourglass is small, fragile, but it's about to sail across continents and sit in the hands of men who'll shape history. You're not just in a workshop anymore, you're at the edge of something bigger. The fire crackles, and Matteo wipes sweat from his brow, unaware he's crafting a legacy. You want to nudge him, say, "Mate, this is going to outlive you by centuries." But you don't. You just watch, letting the soft hiss of sand pull you deeper into the story.
You're still in Matteo's sweltering Venetian workshop, but now your eyes are locked on a small clay bowl filled with sand. It's not just any sand. This stuff is the soul of the hourglass, and it's got a story as gritty as the glass it'll live in. The furnace roars behind you, but Matteo's focus has shifted. He's sifting through the sand with calloused fingers, inspecting it like a jeweler with a diamond. You lean in, catching a faint shimmer in the grains. This isn't beach sand you'd track into your car after a day at the shore. No, this is sand that's been hunted, fired, and fussed over like a newborn. You're about to learn its secrets, and trust me, it's weirder than you think. Kind of like finding out your morning coffee beans were blessed by a shaman. The sand's journey starts far from Venice, maybe on a wind-swept Mediterranean shore or a riverbed where the current polishes stones to dust. Matteo doesn't spill the details, trade secrets, you know, but you can imagine some poor apprentice trudging miles with a sack of this stuff, cursing every step. The mainstream historical fact is that hourglass sand wasn't just scooped and dumped. By the 8th century, artisans learned to select fine, uniform grains to ensure consistent flow. Too coarse, and it'd jam the neck like a bad traffic bottleneck. Too fine, and it'd clump like wet flour. Matteo's sand is perfect, each grain round and smooth, almost hypnotic as it catches the firelight. You're tempted to grab a pinch, but you'd probably ruin his whole vibe. Let's not be that guy. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some glassmakers swore by sand from specific places, like a beach near a holy shrine, believing it carried divine timing. Sounds like medieval marketing spin, right? Buy our hourglass, powered by St. Sandy's blessed beach. You'd chuckle, but back then, people ate it up. Matteo's not that superstitious, though. He's got a more practical magic, fire. You watch him tip the sand into a crucible and shove it into the furnace. The heat's so intense you swear your eyelashes are curling. Why burn sand? To dry it, purify it, and make it flow like liquid time. The process is slow, and you're starting to get why hourglasses weren't cheap. This isn't just sand, it's alchemy, turning dirt into a tool that'll measure prayers and voyages. Historians still argue whether the sand's source mattered as much as the firing process. Some say the beach myths were just hype, while others think certain sands, like those high in quartz, really did flow better. You don't care much for the debate. You're too busy watching the crucible glow cherry red. He pulls it out with tongs, the sand inside now sparkling like tiny stars. He lets it cool, then sifts it again, muttering under his breath. You catch a whiff of scorched earth, sharp and clean. The sand is ready, but Matteo's not done obsessing. He pours it into a test hourglass, a rough prototype, and flips it. You both stare as the grains whisper through the neck, piling into a perfect cone below. It's mesmerizing, like watching a snowfall in miniature. You half expect him to say, "Ta-da!" but he just nods, satisfied. The sand's flow isn't just pretty, it's precise. Each hourglass is calibrated, sometimes for minutes, sometimes hours, depending on the buyer. Sailors need short bursts to time their watches at sea, while monks might want longer flows for vespers. Matteo's got a whole shelf of these things, each one a bespoke marvel. You spot one with red sand, and your modern brain screams, "Wait, is that food coloring?" Nope, probably crushed coral or iron oxide, a fancy touch for a rich client. You're starting to see why Venice was the glass capital. These guys didn't just make stuff. They turned sand and fire into art that ruled time itself. Bet your smartwatch can't compete with that kind of swagger. You shift your weight, your feet aching from standing on the workshop stone floor. The air's thick with heat and the faint clink of glass cooling. Matteo's already prepping another batch of sand, his hands moving like they're dancing with the furnace's pulse. You realize this sand isn't just a filler, it's the hourglass's heartbeat. Without it, the glass is just a pretty shell. You think back to the glowing spheres Matteo shaped in the last section, how they seemed alive in the firelight. Now with the sand, they're complete, ready to count moments that'll guide ships through storms or monks through midnight prayers. The thought hits you. This tiny pile of grains is about to change how humans chase time. You're not just watching a craft, you're seeing history take shape, one trickle at a time.
You're no longer in the furnace-lit haze of Matteo's Venetian workshop. Now you're swaying on the deck of a creaking merchant ship, the salty Mediterranean breeze tugging at your clothes. The sun's dipping low, painting the waves in streaks of gold, but you're not here for the view. Your eyes are glued to a sailor, let's call him Luca, cradling an hourglass like it's his only lifeline. The glass gleams in his rough hands, sand trickling with a faint hiss you can just make out over the slap of waves. This is the 8th century, and out here, time isn't just a number, it's the thread between you and survival. You grip the rail, your modern brain screaming, "GPS, anyone?" But out here, you'd be lost without this sandy little genius. Luca's keeping watch time to measure the ship's speed, and you're about to feel the weight of every grain. Sailors in the 8th century used hourglasses as a standard historical fact, relying on them to time their shifts and calculate speed with a knotted rope called a log line. You watch Luca flip the hourglass, its sand running as another sailor tosses the log line overboard, counting knots as it unravels. The math's simple. Knots per half minute equals speed. You try to do the mental math, but the ship's rocking makes your brain feel like scrambled eggs. Luca doesn't flinch. He's done it 100 times, his eyes flicking between the sand and the horizon. The hourglass is small, maybe a foot tall, tied to a post to keep it steady. It's not fancy like the ones Matteo crafted, but it's tough, built to survive storms and clumsy hands. You're impressed, but also wondering how anyone trusted their life to a glorified egg timer. Talk about high stakes. Here's the quirky bit. Some sailors thought the hourglass held a bit of magic, like it could talk to the sea gods if the sand came from a sacred shore. You roll your eyes, sounds like the kind of tale Luca's spinning to impress the new guy on the crew. But you notice he handles the glass with a reverence that's almost funny, like he's afraid to jinx it. You want to nudge him and say, "Mate, it's just sand," but you don't. Instead, you squint at the horizon, where dark clouds are brewing. The hourglass isn't just about speed, it's timing everything. When to reef the sails, when to change the watch, when to pray you don't sink. You're starting to get why Luca's so attached. Without this thing, they're just guessing, and the sea doesn't forgive bad guesses. Historians still argue whether hourglasses were standard on ships this early or if only wealthier captains could afford them. Some say they were a luxury until the 14th century, when glass got cheaper. You don't care much for the debate. You're too busy watching Luca shout the knot count to the helmsman. The sand runs out, and he flips the glass again, quick and smooth. The crew moves like clockwork, each man tied to the rhythm of those falling grains. You feel the ship lurch under a sudden gust, and your stomach flips. Luca doesn't flinch. He's done it 100 times, his eyes flicking between the sand and the horizon. The hourglass is small, maybe a foot tall, tied to a post to keep it steady. It's not fancy like the ones Matteo crafted, but it's tough, built to survive storms and clumsy hands. You're impressed, but also wondering how anyone trusted their life to a glorified egg timer. Talk about high stakes. You shuffle closer to Luca, the deck slick under your feet. The air smells of tar and brine, and you catch a whiff of fish from the crew's last meal. You're curious about the hourglass's sand. Remember Matteo's obsessive sifting back in Venice? You wonder if this is the same holy beach stuff or just whatever they scraped off a dock. Luca notices you staring and grins, showing a gap where a tooth should be. "She never lies," he says, tapping the glass. You nod, playing along, but you're thinking about how fragile it looks. One bad wave, and smash, time's literally broken. You shudder, picturing the crew scrambling without it, arguing over whose turn it is to stand watch. The hourglass isn't just a tool, it's order in a world that's all chaos and spray. The sun's almost gone now, and the sky's turning bruised purple. Luke is still flipping the glass, timing the next knot count. You feel the ship's rhythm sinking with the sand, each flip a small promise they'll make it to port. You think back to Matteo's workshop, the firelight dancing on those glass spheres.
That was art. This is survival. The hourglass bridges them, a tiny miracle born from sand and sweat, now guiding men across oceans. You lean against the rail, the wood rough under your palms, and let the sand's soft hiss pull you deeper into the night.
You've left the salty sway of Luca's ship behind, and now you're standing in the cool, shadowed hush of a stone monastery, somewhere in 8th century Europe. The air smells of damp moss and beeswax, and your footsteps echo faintly on the worn floor. Before you, a monk, let's call him Brother Anselm, hunches over a wooden table, his robe brushing the ground. He's staring at an hourglass, its sand slipping through the neck with a whisper that feels almost sacred. You're here to see how this glass and sand marvel shapes the rhythm of prayers, not sails. The monastery's quiet, but it's alive with purpose, and you're about to feel the weight of time in a whole new way. Bet you didn't expect a bedtime story to land you in a monk's cell, huh? Too late to swap for a pirate adventure now. Back in the 8th century, hourglasses were used in churches to time ceremonies, a solid historical fact. Monks like Anselm lived by the divine office, a cycle of prayers that carved the day into sacred chunks, matins at midnight, lauds at dawn, vespers at dusk. You watch Anselm flip the hourglass as he murmurs a psalm, the sand marking the length of a chant. It's not a big glass, maybe 6 inches tall, but it's precise, its flow is steady as the monk's voice. You're struck by how it feels like the sand's praying too, each grain a tiny offering. You half wonder if Anselm ever zones out, staring at the flow like you do with a lava lamp. Probably not. He's got that monk-level focus you'll never master. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some monasteries believe the hourglass's sand had to be blessed by an abbot to keep the prayers in tune with heaven. You smirk. Sounds like the medieval version of a priest blessing your Wi-Fi router for better signal. Anselm doesn't seem hung up on that, though. He's too busy keeping the schedule. The hourglass isn't just a timer. It's a lifeline to order, making sure the monks don't oversleep for matins or skimp on their vespers. You glance around the cell. Bare walls, a straw pallet, a single candle flickering. The hourglass is the fanciest thing here, its glass catching the candlelight like a jewel. You're starting to see why it feels holy, like it's holding time itself in its fragile frame. Historians still argue whether hourglasses were common in monasteries this early, or if only wealthier abbeys could afford them. Some say candles were still the go-to timer until glass got cheaper centuries later. You don't care much for the debate. You're too busy watching Anselm's fingers trace the hourglass's wooden stand, worn smooth by years of use. He flips it again, and the sand starts its slow dance. You feel the monastery's rhythm, a pulse of prayer and silence sink to that trickle. It's hypnotic, and you're tempted to sit cross-legged and join in, but your modern knees would probably betray you with a loud crack. You settle for leaning against the wall, the stone cold against your back. The monastery's not as sleepy as you thought. You hear faint voices from the cloister, monks chanting in Latin, their words weaving through the air like threads. Anselm's hourglass keeps them on track, its sand a silent conductor. You think back to Luca's ship, how the hourglass timed knots and watches in a world of chaos. Here, it's different, less about survival, more about devotion. But it's still about control, about carving order from the endless flow of time. You wonder if Anselm ever forgets to flip the glass, letting a prayer run long. You bet he'd get a stern look from the abbot. Imagine the medieval equivalent of a time-out. You shift, your shoes scuffing the floor, and Anselm glances up, his eyes kind but sharp. You freeze, feeling like a kid caught doodling in class.
He nods at the hourglass, as if to say, "This keeps us honest." You nod back, playing along, but you're thinking about Matteo's workshop, where this all began. The sand in Anselm's glass, maybe it's the same stuff Matteo fired, sifted, and blessed with his sweat. The thought connects you across centuries, from furnace to sea to cloister. The hourglass isn't just a tool, it's a thread tying human lives to moments that matter. You watch the last grains fall, and Anselm flips the hourglass again, his voice rising in prayer. The sound pulls you deeper, soft and steady, like the sand itself.
You're back in Venice, but it's not the smoky 8th century workshop of Matteo's day. It's now the 14th century, and the city's a dazzling hub of trade and craft, its canals glinting under a midday sun. You're standing in a bustling glassworks, bigger and brasher than before, where furnaces roar like dragons and artisans shout over the clink of cooling glass. The air's thick with heat and ambition, and you're dodging apprentices hauling crates of raw silica. Your eyes land on a row of hourglasses, dozens of them, lined up like soldiers on a shelf. These aren't the rare treasures they once were. They're everywhere now, thanks to Venice's booming glass industry. You're about to see how this craft went from niche to necessity. And, spoiler alert, it's not just about prettier glass. You're probably wondering if you can snag one as a souvenir, but good luck bartering with these guys. The historical fact is clear. By the 14th century, the glass industry's growth made hourglasses cheaper and more common, spreading them from elite ships and monasteries to kitchens and merchant desks. You watch an artisan, let's call her Sophia, because women were in the trade too, shape a glass bulb with a blowpipe, her hands steady despite the furnace's blaze. She's faster than Matteo was, thanks to better tools and kilns that burn hotter. The glass is clearer too, almost like modern crystal, letting you see every grain of sand inside. You're impressed, but also sweating buckets. Bet you'd trade your phone for a medieval iced latte right now. Sophia's not just making one hourglass, she's got a whole production line going, with apprentices sealing necks and filling bulbs. This is no cottage craft anymore, it's an industry, and Venice is its beating heart. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some 14th century glassmakers added colored sand to hourglasses, green, red, even blue, for rich clients who wanted time to look fancy. You spot one on the shelf, it's sand a deep emerald, and you can't help but think it's the medieval equivalent of a bedazzled smartwatch. Sophia rolls her eyes when you point it out, muttering something about foolish nobles. You grin. She's got your kind of sass. But the colored sand isn't just for show. It's a flex. Proof Venice's glassmakers can do what others can't. You watch her pour plain sand into a new hourglass, the grains hissing like a distant rain. It's the same obsessive process you saw with Matteo, but scaled up. The sand's still fired, sifted, and tested, but now it's sourced from trade routes stretching to Egypt and beyond. You're starting to see why Venice got so rich. Time, literally, is money. Historians still argue whether the hourglass boom was driven by demand or if cheaper glass created the market. Did sailors and monks beg for more, or did glassmakers flood the world with supply? You don't care much for the debate. You're too busy dodging a cart of glowing glass rods that nearly take out your shins. The workshop's chaos is thrilling, a far cry from Brother Anselm's quiet monastery or Luca's stormy deck. Here, hourglasses aren't just tools, they're products, sold to anyone with coin. You spot one headed for a spice merchant's shop, another for a scholar's study. Sophia flips an finished hourglass, testing its flow, and you're mesmerized by the sand's steady dance. It's hypnotic, like watching a screensaver, and you half wonder if you'd fall asleep standing up if not for the furnace's heat. You weave through the workshop, the floor gritty with spilled sand. The air smells of charred wood and molten silica, and you catch snatches of banter, artisans teasing an apprentice who dropped a bulb. You think back to Matteo's solitary focus, Luca's reverence, Anselm's devotion. They all leaned on the hourglass, but now it's bigger than them. Sophia's work fuels a world that's speeding up, where time isn't just measured, but traded, scheduled, owned. You spot a crate of hourglasses bound for a Genoese ship, and you picture them scattered across Europe, ticking away in places you'll never see. It's wild to think this all started with a few grains and a spark of genius.
You lean closer to Sophia's hourglass, the sand piling into a perfect cone, and feel time itself shift, like you're not just watching history, but standing in its flow. You're stepping out of Sophia's bustling 14th century Venetian glassworks, but the hourglass's story isn't over. It's lingering, like sand still trickling in your mind. You're now in a quiet, timeless space, maybe a soft-lit room of your own imagining, where the world feels slower, gentler. The air's cool, carrying a faint scent of old wood and parchment, and you're holding an hourglass, its weight grounding you. The sand flows with a hushed rhythm, each grain a whisper of the journey you followed, from Matteo's furnace to Luca's ship, Anselm's prayers and Sophia's craft. You're here to reflect on what this fragile invention means, how it shaped a world obsessed with time, and how its echoes still hums in your modern life. You're probably thinking, wow, all this from sand? And yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. The historical fact is that hourglasses born in the 8th century and popularized by the 14th were a bridge to modern timekeeping, paving the way for clocks and a world ruled by schedules. You tilt the hourglass, watching the sand pile into a soft cone, and think about how it gave humans a grip on the intangible. Sailors found ports, monks found prayer, merchants found profit, all because of this simple tool. You smile, picturing Luca flipping his glass mid-storm or Anselm sinking psalms to its flow. The hourglass didn't just measure time, it shaped how people lived it. You're tempted to flip yours again just to feel that control, but you let it run, savoring the quiet. It's not like you're racing to catch a medieval ship, right? Modern life's hectic enough. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some 14th century scholars thought hourglasses could predict fate like a crystal ball if you watched the sand's patterns closely enough. You chuckle. Sounds like your aunt reading tea leaves at Thanksgiving. You squint at the grains, half expecting them to spell out buy milk tomorrow, but they just fall, steady and indifferent. Still, you get why people saw magic in it. The hourglass is mesmerizing, a tiny universe where time feels tame. You think back to Sophia's colored sands, those emerald grains for rich nobles. Maybe they believed a fancy hourglass could buy them more time, that they'd be jealous of your snooze button. Historians still argue whether the hourglass's spread changed society or if society's growing complexity demanded tools like it. Did it make people time-obsessed, or were they already heading that way? You don't dive too deep into the debate. You're too busy tracing the hourglass's curve with your finger, its glass cool and smooth. It's fragile, like the moments it measures, yet it outlasted empires. You picture it on ships and churches, on desks, each flip a small act of defiance against time's chaos. You're struck by how it connects you to Matteo, Luca, Anselm, Sophia, all of them chasing moments, just like you chase deadlines or bedtimes. The room feels softer now, the light dimming like a fading candle. You set the hourglass down, its sand still flowing, and lean back, letting your shoulders sink. The world outside can wait, your phone's buzzing, your inbox is probably a mess, but here, time feels kinder. You think about how the hourglass taught humans to carve up days, to value minutes, yet it's also a reminder that time slips away. You're not getting all existential, but it's humbling. Like realizing you spent an hour scrolling reels when you meant to sleep. The sand's almost gone now, the top bulb nearly empty. You don't flip it yet. You want to linger in this calm where history feels like a lullaby. As the last grains fall, you feel a gentle pull, like the story's tucking you in. The hourglass's legacy isn't just in clocks or apps, it's in how you see the world, how you choose to spend your hours. You close your eyes, the sand's faint hiss fading, and picture a Venetian shore where it all began. Waves lapping, glass glowing, time waiting to be caught. The room's quiet now. You're breathing slow and even. You're safe, drifting, wrapped in the story's glow. Let the hourglass rest. Its work is done for tonight.